There's a reason I'm always talking about foreign policy when other people haven't. Remember when I worked for Reverend Jackson, one of my big portfolio issues was dealing with international relations. When Brittany Griner was being held hostage in Russia, I was part of the team working with Reverend Jackson to try to negotiate her release. I've traveled to over 22 countries around the globe, met with foreign dignitaries and leaders when I worked in Congress. We worked directly on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. So foreign policy is my jam, folks. And one of the big things going on is this conversation between Netanyahu and Trump yesterday. So, for background, yesterday we talked about the fact that they're trying to push through this $1.5 trillion bill, the National Defense Authorization Act, increasing defense spending by 50% year over year. But in addition to that, Section 224 of that bill would merge the U.S. and Israeli militaries, essentially giving us the same command and control structure, same logistics, same technological innovations. Anything that America has, Israel would have also. It's very similar to the agreement that America has with NATO, our closest allies, or at least they were our closest allies prior to Trump. So I give you that by way of background to talk about where we got to just yesterday between Trump and Netanyahu in the war in Iran. As everyone knows, Trump is desperate to get out of this war. I mean, he really wants to get out of this war. So let's do a timeline of events. I actually wrote this down of how we got to Trump cussing out Benjamin Netanyahu and what it actually means. February 28th, 2026, the U.S. and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury. Nearly 900 joint air strikes against Iran, killing the supreme leader in a decapitation strike. Then Iran retaliates from February 28th to March 1st. Hundreds of missile and drone strikes, destroying nearly half of U.S. military bases, making them uninhabitable in the region, killing 14 U.S. service people, destroying billions of dollars U.S. property, attacking our allies in the Gulf region. So, after that, Israel begins a ground invasion of Lebanon. You may be saying, wait, when did that happen? I didn't hear about that. March 17th through the 24th. Israel launched a ground invasion against Lebanon because on March 2nd, Hezbollah sent rockets from southern Lebanon into Israel, according to Israel, Hezbollah being an ally of Iran. So Israel launches a full-blown ground invasion, and they have now taken about 10% of the country all the way up to the Litani River. So now we get to April 7th and 8th. Trump has brokered a 2-week ceasefire with Iran. That's the one that we've been reiterating since then, to stop the bombs from falling, but also this has remained with the Straits of Hormuz being closed, no permanent ending, a U.S. blockade being in place, and international oil supplies running bone dry. On the 16th of April, Trump announced a 10-day extension to the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, and also extended 3 more weeks after the fighting continued. So at that point, Israel and Lebanon were supposed to stop fighting on April the 16th. However, the whole thing unraveled. Israel started destroying more Hezbollah targets. Hezbollah began firing more rocket drone attacks into Israel. 14 IDF soldiers were killed. Unknown thousands of Lebanese were murdered by the Israelis. So then, May 28th and 29th, last week, U.S. and Iran reached a tentative 60-day ceasefire extension. This is what Trump was out there talking about. So then Israel attacked Lebanon again. Remember, Hezbollah and Iran are allies. Iran is not going to make any deal as long as Hezbollah is still being attacked. So every single time we get close to either a ceasefire or a peace deal, Israel attacks Lebanon and attacks Hezbollah so that they will blow up the deal, and that's what they did. So then Iran suspends all negotiations over Israel's escalating attacks on Hezbollah and Lebanon. Iran conditions the peace deal on a Lebanese truce, and that came after Trump conditioned any peace deal on every Gulf country agreeing to accept the Abraham Accords, which is a treaty with Israel to normalize relationships. So now Iran is saying we will not have any deal unless Hezbollah is part of the peace deal. Trump is saying we will not have any deal unless you normalize relations with Israel. This war is no longer about the U.S. and Iran or nuclear weapons or nuclear dust or the Straits of Hormuz. That is where the new battle lines are. The rest of that stuff has basically been ironed out. Now we're getting to the meat of it, which is Netanyahu. So now, first Netanyahu call. President Trump on June the 1st, so that was yesterday at 7 p.m. is Israel time. Trump demanded that Israel agree to Hezbollah, to a ceasefire with Hezbollah. Netanyahu says Israel will strike Beirut if Hezbollah doesn't stop attacking. So Trump comes out at 9 p.m. and he's posting on Truth Social saying, hey, we got a ceasefire. Everything's great. There are no troops are going to be going to Beirut. Israel and Hezbollah agreed to stop shooting, and he turned their troops around. 9:30. Netanyahu contradicts Trump, and he says Israel will attack Beirut if Hezbollah doesn't cease attacking. Says Israel's offensive in the south of Lebanon will continue. Then Israel carried out the biggest attacks they have of the entire war on Beirut. Now we have the second call between Trump and Netanyahu. So midnight last night, this is according to reports by both Axios and the Times of Israel. Trump gets on the phone with Netanyahu and quote-unquote explodes with profanity. He tells Netanyahu, he says, are you effing crazy? You'd be in prison if it weren't for me. Everyone hates Israel right now, he yells. What the F are you doing? This is what gets leaked out to the media. So what does all this mean? All this means is that Trump is no longer in control of this war. He does not get to set the conditions for when the war ends. This also means that the U.S. and Iran are now junior partners in Netanyahu's war. The U.S. and Iran cannot come to any peace deal so long as Israel continues attacking Lebanon. Because unless Israel is part of any peace deal, if America agrees on Monday to stop attacking Iran, then Israel will attack later on Monday, regardless of what the U.S. says. We do not hold the cards. We do not make the decisions. Trump has backed himself into a Gordian knot. He has an issue, not a problem. The difference is problems have a solution. Issues don't have a solution. They just persist. And there is no clear way to get out of this hole that he has found himself in. We're going to talk more about this after the break, where exactly Trump can go from here, because right now he is no longer in control of this war that he has started, and there is no way for him to get out of this. I personally think he leaked the quote-unquote profanity-laced phone call so he could save face publicly and make it look like he was holding Netanyahu accountable, when in reality, there was more likely the other way around, and Netanyahu explaining to Trump that he ain't about to do nothing, and there's nothing you can do to make him. We're going to talk more about this after the break. Call on 447-266-1380 News and Talk 1380 WAOK.